I just mentioned it to you because
Start later in the year.
I'm not a good.
That's the best way to do it.
Well,
they have a deadline to report.
yeah, we would love to, but we don't have the time. We got a month shaved off our schedule this year.
That's exactly what I would say. I would love to, but I don't have the time.
Okay. You're on the payroll, we're not.
I know.
I used to have managers that worked for me that said that.
So tell me about the Poundstone article. I didn't read anything.
I have to leave by noon.
Is this about the meeting?
I
need to leave by 10:45.
I got actually a phone call at 12
Main
today
Street.
myself.
Well, I actually am on a 12:50 boat, so I
Remember you asked me to go? Yeah.
We're gonna discuss
Kind of.
like
Oh,
this
okay.
whole thing.
How did that go?
Without
I thought it went well.
Good. I'm just
And not in a way that
the thing at the club car is good. That's all we're doing though, right?
What's that?
we
the
need to
little
make
thing
a
you do
decision
at
on
the
how we're
club
gonna
car,
let it
that's it,
affect us.
right?
If we're gonna let us affect us.
So sidewalk fluffy thing with the
It's
little
gonna be
push
that
down.
we turn them away, if we turn
That
them
you
away,
just-
or the
they just
criteria,
did, like-
They're still working on it.
No, but
if
that's
we
it, though.
reschedule for a later
We're
date.
not widening
what are we-
all the
you know,
way
what
up
are we
the taxi
doing?
stand.
Because right
Yeah,
now,
we are.
Well, we have to, if we're the ones
Well,
that
we're
are
only-
more
we're only
proactive
going to-
than department heads, and that's the road.
Yeah, but-
Front entrance of the car right now.
Because there's not, I don't know if there's enough space there,
Oh,
like there
yeah.
is in the other
you
one.
mean in terms of
Oh,
the
there is.
determination?
Yeah, there is.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it's a single lane.
Yeah, but
With
trucks
Right.
turning left,
And that's what I'm
Even
gonna, and that's what I'm
Okay.
gonna bring up to the
Yep.
group to decide today. Because
Okay.
we've been trying to.
I'm okay with it,
regular
but I'm
basis,
not,
I understand.
and we're
I'm
not
just
getting
trying to
anywhere.
be,
I turn my mic.
save you from
Yeah, I
yourself
just
if we
think
go too far somewhere. That's all I'm
Talk too
saying.
close to it and it'd be like, boom,
Okay,
No, we won't.
we should,
reverberating.
no, I will,
In fact,
no, that's, I've never, I didn't know that was part of this plan.
Oh, God, what's
I
this?
told them to stop right in the club car,
Yeah.
get the taxi stand back up, and make sure that's good.
Okay,
And we'll pick up where we left off.
that's a good thing.
Because we're going down Easy Street after that.
We are? What else are we doing on Easy Street?
Resetting everything. And we're gonna bump, the water side's coming in.
We are gonna do that,
Yeah.
just a little. Bump it out and then bump it in. The out and the in, right?
How do you spell swill?
Swill.
Those are those water cups, right?
I do wanna know.
Oh no, that's swell.
It sounds like fun, but I don't
Swill
know.
is a word that
You know,
can be used for multiple definitions, swill.
As
But you know what I
pigsty?
can't stand? I'm
Or was
gonna
that
have to say
swine?
this
Oh, that's
because it's a
swine.
damn-
That's swine.
There's two words I can't stand.
But you might get out of
We
this.
gotta
swell.
just stop saying it. Narrative
In your regard.
and what is the thing that you say all the time? I'm hearing it all the time.
Me?
No, you.
I'm not
you say it.
argumentative.
It's
Utility.
How about
Art.
Various utilities?
No, the
Anonymous.
I'm ominous.
no, it's a thing for
Anon-
computer
I-
programs.
No fair. You were a
Program
journalist.
What?
You were a journalist and all that
Program word
stuff.
Starts with an A.
Analytical hierarchy?
No.
Your lexicon is much more robust.
It's being used constantly now.
No,
I'm like, I hate
overpriced
this
swill.
word.
Well,
Swill.
tell me so I don't use it.
Swill.
You might say it.
Swill.
Because it gets said a lot. You're
Yeah.
the first one I've ever heard it with. And then all of a sudden I'm hearing it on Fox, I'm hearing it on different interviews.
I'd like to think I might have a breath of impact, but I don't think it's quite that far.
No, narrative is the new one from last year.
Yeah.
This word narrative just is popped up and it's being used constantly.
used this term last night that.
Rob, we're going to be probably 10 or 15 minutes.
Algorithm. Algorithm.
Algorithm.
That's why I was going to go with that before.
Where did this
Sorry.
come from? Algorithm. It's
Algorithm.
brand new.
Calculus.
Algorithm
I
is-
looked it up on Wikipedia. It's an old word from the 1500s.
Yeah.
But I mean, I never heard it before till recently. It just keeps getting repeated
It's
over and
the word
over
that they
again.
use to
That's why I had a meeting at the school this morning.
abacus. It replaces the word
Remember when
abacus.
JFK Jr. died? Unfortunately,
Yeah.
he would have been the next president. You know what word came up when the crash happened and they had to figure out about the vertigo?
Yeah.
'Cause that's what happened. He thought he was flying straight.
He was inverted,
He was upside down. Guy Island Air, before the fast boats became the airport, he told me all that. It's very interesting how that how you, nighttime when the horizon and all that.
It
all-
didn't help, he had a cast on his foot.
Well, the
Yeah.
word closure was the new word that started. We need closure.
Jeez.
of that. And that was a word for about 2-3 years.
Yeah,
It was
no.
just over and over, and I haven't heard it in a while.
Well,
Well,
but
effort,
we need closure.
using effort as a verb.
I haven't heard that one.
Effort. Oh, that's big for me too.
I gotta get my prescription
Algorithm thing,
changed.
though. I mean, I'm like, is this a prehistoric animal? What is this thing? Like, I had to look it up.
It's not a prehistoric.
It's one of yours from your MBA stuff. It's all fluffy, computery, programming, weird stuff, but it came out of the 1500s. It has a whole Greek. I mean, it's a Arabic word
They were really great mathematicians back then.
Absolutely.
Who
with
we
chisels
still
and
use
hammers.
The foundation of what they developed today.
Beautiful.
I know.
King Tut. They wrapped them up, all set. You ship them off on the boat. Didn't need a crematorium in Nantucket.
All right, so the abacus is gone, the algorithm is in, and we're at the Capcom meeting. It's,
Oh, boy.
we're gonna call this to order. I'm just kind of hoping Jason will be here.
He's here. His
He's
car's
gonna
out
be-
there.
They may be late because they're upstairs with executive session.
Okay. Do you have any idea how long that'll go on? Because it's in for this discussion we're gonna have would be beneficial to have as many members involved.
Hold on, let me ask.
That's why we can go out of sequence.
There we go.
Yeah, before I call them.
Even just texting involves algorithm.
Everywhere you look, there's a hidden algorithm.
It's true.
Math is everywhere.
Singapore
I
math.
just want to go back.
Wait
to-
till,
Singapore math.
wait till the Internet of Things hits the island.
The what, Rob?
The
Math is
Internet of
everywhere except for
Things.
zoning.
When
Nobody ever
5G
looked at that.
takes over and computers start talking to objects
Yeah.
and equipment.
AI?
Be interesting.
Okay, so the response was we probably have another 30 minutes.
All right, so we'll just proceed. I think we need to have the discussion and move forward.
Oh, good.
All right, so I'm going to call the meeting of Capital Program Committee to order Thursday, September 13th. It's around 10:35. We, I believe, are being auto video recorded, and present are Richard Hussey, Nat Lowell, myself, Stephen Welch, Peter McEachern, Christy Kickham. Brian, if you start chatting, I'm going to ask you to join us at the tables. Let's see, I'd like to get a motion to approve the agenda with some flexibility. We've got a little bit of, we'll get to in a moment.
So moved.
All right, so that carries unanimously. There being no dissent. Public comment, there's no one here from the public. I do want to just make an agenda announcement. We've had an update posted with respect to the meeting location. We are in the same building. Upstairs is being used by the training, for training purposes.
And where's Terry Norton, Mr. Chairman?
Terry is
I mean, I'm just saying.
away for the week, is
So-
my understanding.
Who's doing-
I don't know.
I don't know.
She'll take minutes from the table.
Tape, okay.
Yeah, so guys, talk into your microphone so it makes it easier for Terry to do her job, because
The narrative.
definitely doesn't make it easy on her otherwise. All right, so we've got on the agenda review and approve minutes from August 16th, 23rd, and 6th. I'd like a motion to hold the minutes. There's some revisions that have been made, some have not.
Make that motion.
And of those, they've not been circulated.
Make that motion.
Second.
Okay, so that carries unanimously, no dissent. We're gonna take up number 8, which is good of the order, is in place of number 6 for the moment. So I think, as you all know, we received a large number of requests of pretty significant cost last night and just insufficient time to review. Well, basically what I'm doing is voicing some of our concerns, and I think town administration and FinCom, finance department too, and to some extent the departments. I won't speak for them, but I do believe that they're all congruent. I just want to voice some of our concerns, the baseline of short committee discussion, and see if we can get on track before we get too far off track. We received, as I said, received a large number of requests, significant costs last night, not enough time to review them, which presents a set of issues, and there's no backup detail included for any of the requests, which also presents a set of issues. Ideally, and I think minimally, we all agree we need time and information to assess requests on our own before a meeting, when we meet with the department head. Part of our tight scheduling, which shaved a month off the process and brought out years into discussion, anticipated that we were able to come prepared with questions at the ready and avoid the necessity of a request by request presentation by a department head. Benefits were other than helping us to meet our requirements or the financial policies and procedures, was it gave us time for discussion we missed out on in the last budgeting season, which we all thought was important to have, including as applies to the RORI and when we assign values. And also by restructuring a little bit and anticipating we get information in advance in time when we anticipated doing out years, which we didn't do last season, but the idea there is that by focusing on out years, we can develop an exceptions-only approach in future years. So it's actually cutting down on the workload for the department heads and for town admin and finance staff and for the committee. All right, so, I guess where I left it was one department being behind isn't the end of the world, and no one's suggesting the sky is falling, but we're not where we reasonably planned to be back when we scheduled in May, nor when we rescheduled in August, or even earlier this month. And between that and the lack of a fully functioning, tested RORI online input is going to start to have, I think, some impacts on our schedule. And of course, we're working on a schedule to help prevent other issues within the town operations. So I've been following up with the town admin and finance in these matters regularly, and of course, they're relying on department heads to get the information in. And the department heads have been trying to field competing priorities. This isn't an indictment of anyone. We understand that the town's going through tremendous growing pains. And some of those priorities clearly take precedence over what it is we have to accomplish. But at the same time, we still have to accomplish what we have to accomplish. So that's the context. So where we are right now is we need to discuss how to handle requests that are not timely. And we also need to discuss requests that are not timely and or complete. So those are the two categories. I'm just going to throw out there, right, wrong, or otherwise, to get the ball rolling, some things we might consider. So requests that aren't timely, goal is obviously to get a timely submission, but there's going to be some lates. It's just part of the reality of where we are. And as a proper capital asset management plan is put into place, it's going to happen. Along those lines, and I'm not going to get bogged down in details. Town administration is actively pursuing changes to the capital asset management. I think that's fair to say. I wasn't going to mention that, but then again, I didn't expect I was going to be doing this right now. So I guess the suggestion there is that maybe we roll with some lates, but don't concede the point that they need to be a rare exception. And if we have to accommodate, we have longer or more meetings. So there's the not timely for a pre-meeting review issue and a potential solution that we can discuss. There's two other solutions, and then we'll open up for discussion. The lack of the backup, we had discussed as one approach is just turning away requests that don't have backup. And I personally think could be counterproductive for a variety of reasons, and that perhaps instead we might take just a at the table risk and cost based approach to reviewing which ones we do call and which ones we don't. So basically like a bona fide safety issue, something that's absolutely required to prevent high degradation of service, or something that if we were going to recommend but we didn't bother to review it because we didn't have the backup, it will actually cost the town more money. We don't want to be shooting ourselves in the foot, obviously. So those are the lack of backups. the other thing we could do is we can request the department head to provide the adequate information and reschedule them. But that's going to have an impact on our overall schedule, which, as I mentioned, has an impact on other aspects of town operations. I think, you know, it might be beneficial for department heads, but that's not our area of determining things. We need to determine, do we have the information we need to make a recommendation and then move forward on it? And if we don't, how we're going to address it. And that's why I'm bringing it up now, because I don't want this to continue based on the concerns that have been voiced. It'll be problematic for everyone. So the last thing I'll say is you know, we don't have to take big steps, but we need to be moving in the right direction. And right now we're not. So I appreciate you guys listened to that. I know it's a little bit, I was up at 4 a.m. thinking about it, and I want us as a process to try and get a handle on it. So open the floor to you guys for thoughts and see what you think.
My biggest concern is always not making it harder for the department heads beyond, how do I say this, a really good, solid explanation for FinCom, us, and Article 8, or whatever.
For what, a
stuff's
request?
gonna be in, yeah. You know? I'm looking at what Rob's got here right now, and it says various locations. I'm assuming that a lot of the stuff is sort of like a placeholder type of thing in some things.
Yeah, I don't want to.
No, I know you don't want to get into that now.
I just prefer we
was
stick
using
on,
it as an
use an
example.
That's fine.
Yeah. We have a lot of that. I mean, my eyes were opened wide last week with that Loran Station stuff.
Yeah.
It was like, I didn't even know or think about that. I'm driven by it a bazillion times since I was old enough to remember driving by it and never thought of it the way it was explained last week. It's concrete housing, just needs, neighbors want it to look better. Buildings need work, but they're not going to fall over. If ever would, they wouldn't even be there. Very
Right.
interesting.
Yeah, it is, but I guess
You know what I'm saying?
I do, but I want to bring it back to the. I think it's important what you're saying, but I want to bring it back to how are we going to process? I mean, this year's requests I think are a little bit different. This year there literally are discussions going on to put into place some of our recommendations, which would make fundamental changes to the way the capital asset management occurs, and eliminate much, if not all, of the problems we're currently having. And when I say problems, I mean the growing pains, the department heads having competing priorities that are untenable. It's just part of a community that's rapidly growing. But town administration and finance are taking steps to address it. But for right now, we have fiscal year 20 requests to handle.
Yeah.
How are we going to handle them? If they come in the door late, we don't have time to review it before we meet with the department head. Is that efficient use of our time and their time, or do we reschedule them? Or do we, and then without backup detail, do we, I need feedback from you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think where basically the environment has always been for a long time, some have backup, some don't. And the process moves forward, and it should have always been, there should be backup information for the committee to process. And you know, Rob just got here, but you know, I think that the deputy chief came in and could, for the most part, verbally explain everything that they want to do. They didn't mention, we had to ask the question if there was anything new. That's when he got into, yeah, they're going to make some cosmetic additions. That didn't come out in his, presentation. So I think that, the backup material helps us to ask the right questions. You know, the water tower is a perfect example. Maybe that's a question we didn't ask as far as warranty when they initially did that. In the processes, the products they use. But so, the backup information is not just numbers. It's also, helps us to ask the right questions so that we don't get into a situation where we have like the water tank, where the water tower that was, dissolving in a short amount of years. But I mean, I'm a firm believer that, it's helpful to have the backup information as much as possible. It's not fair to the departments that are providing backup information, you know? And yeah, I mean, it's always been floated around that, you know, whether you want the ones that give backup, see their request through, or in the ones that don't, you say, I don't have enough to decide on what to do here. But
Yeah, I just, if I may, I think, Richard, please.
My question would be, is there enough administrative help in these departments that are struggling with providing information to get us what we need? I mean, I'm all for giving, for giving a department head who's tremendously busy, incredibly busy. And if he doesn't have the staff, backup staff to be doing the detail work that's needed for this.
May I?
Sure.
Brian, can you please, because this is important for you to be involved in. Okay. Thank you. Because I don't want to speak for town administration, but I want to be able to address comments that are made. So that's a point well taken, and I think I would add to it that no one's looking to penalize the department, any department, for any reason because they can't get it in, but at the same time, part of the role of this committee is citizen oversight, and to do our job diligently, we obviously need the information. To your point, I think the record shows that there isn't sufficient staffing as a result of the rapid growing pains we're going through, but town admin is both through a staffing study. I mean, I'm not defending, I just want to get the information out because my role as chairman is I'm being proactive behind the scenes and trying to get this to work. So there is a staffing study going on to help address where there are growing pain type shortcomings and operational efficiency can be created and things along those lines that the select board have established as important, which I think are great best practices. And there is a specific kind of initiative going on to get the capital asset management better squared away through a staffing type of a setup. So the reason I say it is for information, but also I am trying to direct, I think what I'm trying to do is, and I think I'm correct in doing this, is that this is a this year thing. We've got FY20 requests and out years and Rory to process. How are we going to get through it in a successful manner that we complete our role without, again, no one's looking to penalize department heads because they've got competing priorities, and no one's looking to, I know for a fact none of us wants to be turning something away and then it ends up costing the town, significant costs later on as a result. So I don't know how to get there. I mean, I have ideas, but I need input from you guys on that. Administration staff isn't going to change between now and the end of the year. That's the problem.
Right.
So, Christie, and then now.
yeah, just to answer both your questions, Nat, it is going to make more work for the department head. There's definitely, there's more of a process of them getting backup information. And I think, to Richard, your point, we're the process that does take over some of that overload. But we need that information to do that. Libby's job is to let the department heads know you need to, back up your requests. So, I mean, that's my thought.
Yeah, and I mean, just to be clear, I've been pursuing these things on a regular basis through finance and town admin, and they are too. And I don't think the message is unheard by the department heads. It's not like they're just saying, I mean, I want to be really clear. I've never gotten any inclination, and I would never suggest that there's department heads who are just saying, well, whatever. Like, they feel the pressure. They want to turn in the information because they want their requests approved. They want our recommendation, and they want a FinCom recommendation, and they want to go through the process. We just got to figure out how we're going to get from where we are today to, and the reason, look, this came up in our discussions for the last several meetings, and it's come up in conversation generally. And last night we got 27 requests for a significant amount of money, and it's just hard for us to do due diligence in the time we have allotted. We don't have enough time in our schedule as we've scheduled it to complete a review on a presentation line, but request by request basis from a department head. And then have our discussion about the topics, have our discussion about the Rory, and also have an out years discussion. So do we reschedule people? Do we need more time? Do we have more meetings? What do we?
I'm open to any of that.
Yeah, I'm open to any of that as well. I think the more that the department head vets the request before it comes to us, the better prepared we are to discuss it, but also the better prepared they are once the request is granted. Mm-hmm. If it is, they're just in a better position to, move forward with it.
Well, then that gets to a discussion that we've had in previous years, and we've had this year, I think, a little bit, but it's just kind of it's on our ranking of relative importance. Is this a deliverable for the fiscal year it's requested? Which, we go back to Brian's comment before. I think it was Brian who said, we're building a house and we're living in it. I mean, it's kind of like we're trying to dig a foundation and we've got a tent pitched in the footprint. So, yeah. Peter?
I mean, I look at it as any department head who provides backup, even 7 days in advance or the day before, the night before. There's always a level of subjectivity that we as a committee are going to avail. The more backup that you provide, the less that becomes subjective to our inability to understand what they're doing. So it makes things go a lot quicker. It doesn't mean that sometimes backup that we receive is spot on. It still takes some of our abilities or background to weed through that, but it does provide a little more credibility to a presentation. I would, to be proactive, as I always try to be, I would allow the department head to make the presentation, and if there is an item or a series of items that we can't understand or need more material, we can always postpone and say, hey, to promote it, let's wait on that item and then come back on that specific line item. Some of the things specifically that Rob's going to bring up, it's not rocket science. Items that he put down, he did it last year where we had the multitude of venues that would receive maintenance, roofs. So that was put forth a year ago. And I'll just say that Rob's not new anymore. He's part of the team and part of what really makes this island work. And it's so important. DPW, and I'll always champion DPW well over administrative people because it's the nuts and bolts. It's what the fixed assets that his department touches is, what we own. I know people, we don't own people, but it's the fixed assets, and I'll always champion that. So I'd like to, if I could just at least say, why don't we get Rob to the stand so we can go through these items?
Okay, and I'm happy to do that, but we need to come up with a plan on how we want to proceed, because this isn't I want to be clear that it's not just Rob. Rob happens to be in front of us today, but we have departments that we have not had information come on and we're rescheduling. Is that how, I just want
well, and I think that has to come from the department head to the finance department, and if we don't get it in a timely manner, I think then we have to raise our hand and say, hey, what's going on?
Right, and what I'm looking for from you guys at this point is, what do we want to do with that? Are we saying we want to just schedule another meeting with them coming back with backup detail? I just need some idea of the direction you want to head. Is it we want to accept it and just be accommodative by expanding our schedule?
I think it's just, like I said, I think it
have an issue with.
Creates more exposure for them. It provides them a little more credibility on their request. So if they do not want to provide backup, then that's, in theory, maybe their choice. And
I mean, we haven't defined backup. I sort of think backup is a reason for something, showing an alternative. It's different than a new truck. New truck is harder to back up than some other things.
Well, backup.
Crazy as that sounds.
I think I made a note here.
Because you still usually have a truck that runs.
Yeah, I made a note here
a new one.
about the backup stuff. So right now, it's part of our asset management policies and our business procedures for capital don't include specifically what backup should include.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, and it will, I believe, that will be part of what the development is. And that will be honed in over years. But where we're at now is more about getting information that we as lay people with various experience can review and comment on. That's where we are with backup details right now. And I think it's the things that you would consider normally in to back up a request. If it's a particular asset, what it is, some information on its useful life, some information on the department head being familiar with what the maintenance costs are, and so on and so forth. At a later date, I think we would pin down what the backup is. But I don't want to belabor this. We have an idea now, I think consensus from the group, that what we want to do is work with department heads to extend where they do not have backup that we feel we need and reschedule them. And we'll have to take that up, Brian, on
Individual
schedule.
basis.
We'll do it on an individual basis, but we need to, we need to proceed. We're going to proceed with what gets turned in, and then we're going to determine what we need more information on and schedule.
As a committee.
As a
Yeah,
committee.
that's fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. All right, well, thank you. It's just important for me to have some direction on this. I'm hearing concerns from individuals, and I want to make sure I address them. Rob, we would appreciate your joining us, and thank you for your patience.
No problem.
See what you started?
And again, just say, we get it. We know you got competing interests, and we know you're doing a good job with everything, but we just needed to get that nailed down for our own selves.
No, I totally appreciate where the committee's coming from. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of needs. There's a lot of activity. Yes, there's certainly some confusion. I think we're all talking about similar items and under competing interests, trying to get us the best information forward as expeditiously as possible. And I look forward to working with the committee through the years to refine the process as well. So with that, I'd sort of start and say we are, sort of building the house we're living in, as was said earlier. We're undertaking processes to get the capital that was approved at annual town meeting moving forward. So we're making progress there with finance, getting scopes and contracts in place. I will say part of the challenge with that is the economy. The economy is so strong right now. Getting qualified, able-bodied contractors to even show any interest is a major challenge. So, not as an excuse, but the reality is getting, let's say, the capacity that we have and the windows of opportunity to do the work are now competing with the availability of folks to carry out the work in these limited windows that we have to do the work. So it just needs to be stated that we'd love to flip the switch July 1st and say go, or the day after Labor Day. And in some cases, we have been able to with our highway construction crew. But facilities, not so much. So we're working through those, and we're getting those things identified. That said, what you've seen, but what we've presented so far, is sort of been laid out last year, and we're committed to all of the important aspects of this. Down the road, having a complete life cycle, asset management program. We're well away from that. Right now, we're really trying to address the pages of town-owned facilities and their needs. And so going forward with those sort of, let's say, hopeful lump sums for facilities, as an example, for roof repairs, the big ones, roof repairs, ADA accessibility upgrades, the utility updates, site paving, public bathrooms and equipment and lighting replacements. Those are really the low-hanging fruit that exist universally through our town facilities that need help. And so we are, again, moving forward with the ones that have been approved, and we're continuing to develop what the various locations are, prioritizing those, and working with finance to move forward on those. So we're simply asking for the chunks that we have presented in those same or similar categories with regard to facilities. As we move down the road and start to uncover other things that need to get done, I think, and I will say that we're excited to let everyone know that we did finally get an accepted offer from a new deputy director for facilities with a very extensive background. We're excited to bring on board this coming November. So Chaz Rogers is his name, and I feel confident that we'll be having a very different discussion regarding facilities this time next year.
That's great.
So that's all good stuff. You know, we'll certainly come back to the DPW garage facility or the campus improvements discussion. But beyond that, we're talking about fleet maintenance. You know, we had a new fleet manager join us last November, who's been fantastic. Eric Johnson. He's been integral with developing our wants and needs for the coming 2020 ask. And so we have provided those numbers. We do have backup for that, but we will share that certainly as we develop the backup for the rest of these as well. But the good news is, so we're now looking at it and talking about administrative help, and that we're building staff, and the program is making progress. Public Works. With additional key staff, as I pointed out. I would love to spend what I would feel would be adequate time to vet every last one of these asks in the level of detail that I would feel more comfortable with. Absolutely. We are working towards that. I think we're making progress. In the meantime, I think we're following last year's format as best we can, because we did sort of spend the time last year laying out how that would sort of look for the next 5. We have been approved some very substantial chunks of change with regard to, say, like stormwater, $3.5 million. And that's going to go a long ways. We've taken steps already. We have contracts in place. We're already doing the engineering for a number of these analyses. And stormwater is going to be a focus, but we don't need ongoing additional funding this year for stormwater. We have a huge chunk to work from. We're going to see how it plays out and then come back, you know, the year before we need more. That's the sort of thing that I respectfully am looking for, sort of the give and take with the committee here, is until we have a couple years under our belt here. I think last year, you know, the committee was very helpful in recognizing that, yes, we do have lots of needs that are maybe not as specifically developed as we'd like to see them, but we'll be back in the same seat right now this year having that similar discussion, because we're not even going to be out of the blocks yet with starting those projects that were approved last year. So here we are.
So just, well, topical, we had discussed last year with these, what Nat had referred to in some ways as a placeholder, which I understood what he meant, but annual facility roof repairs, public bathroom upgrades, utility updates. At this time last year, or maybe actually a little bit later in the year, we were discussing these as a long-term type of a maintenance, capital maintenance investment, phased over years. But that you were going to be able to, you thought you would be able to have details in place so you could kind of give us a better idea of, as examples of what the money's being spent on. But at this point, it sounds like just because of all the things you're giving, you know, due credit to everything you said before about getting things done, you don't have that, you can't have that list yet, but you do have a better idea of what the FY20 request cost should be. So we had talked about you'd bring in a list and you'd say, okay, well, this is all we did and this is what we're gonna do. You're not really prepared to do that for a variety of reasons, but you do have a better idea, obviously, of what the numbers should be for your FY20 asks. These are based on your FY19 activities?
That's, they're based
planned
on
activities?
our planned activities.
Planned activities.
Yes. So I would say, I think it's going to be really helpful for everybody to understand what gets accomplished in 19. To say, this is what we're able to do with the monies that were given to us, both based on priorities that were needed, and also based on capacity. And I think that capacity is the discussion that's going to fluctuate based on the economy. You know, we had some discussion before the meeting started about facility repairs or new construction for major capital, such as the campus improvements to DPW itself. And it's very likely that, you know, looking out years, the major capital for a facility improvement like that would certainly benefit sort of on the downturn economy, because you're going to have more qualified contractors in a hungrier position to go after that work. And I definitely feel strongly about that right now the prices are, you know, very high, and availability is almost nil.
So does anyone, while we're hitting this category, I think, of work under facilities, or maybe even just to branch out, there's only one more. Let me just restate. I think with respect to the Public Works Garage and the Jetties Beach, I'd like to take those up as separate questions and topics. But right now, with the kind of phasing and annual allotment towards certain things like roof repairs, facility roof repairs, ADA accessibility, and utility updates, and so on and so forth. Does anyone have questions for Rob on those, or the DPW facility access parking lot maintenance? Please, Peter.
If I may, what I think would be helpful, Rob, is I know now that you all have literally a copy of all the fixed assets, all the buildings that the town owns, and just to hear you say that, okay, here's my pecking order for 19, here's my pecking order where I plan to attack and make repairs for the year 20 is enough for me, because of the fact these are small items based on what they're going to protect and the work that we're going to do to protect them. You know, $500,000 in roofs, you can make that disappear easy in a couple of different structures. So I think from a credibility standpoint is to hear you say you have a fixed asset schedule that has an internal schedule of plan of attack on where those monies are going to be spent over the next couple of years, which means you're going to attack those buildings that the degradation is greater than something was built 2 years ago. It's kind of a comment and a question.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I think that's the backup that I was really looking for too.
Do you have that? Is that something you have back in the office?
We do not have it for every facility.
Okay.
What we have definitely been focusing on is the town building cluster, that block, as well as the concessions and other outbuildings. 2FG comes to mind, and there's others we're looking at, 37 Washington as well. So there's I'd say what I would call sort of the core everyday. Same thing with natural resources, you know, as kind of lumped into that same jetty site. There's the high focus on let's say the more important structures. Yeah. There's other things happening. There's just remnant structures that are laying in decay that we're taking action on to demolish. Again, not really worth going into details about, but just stuff that needs to be cleaned up as well. And so this sort of, we're kind of coming at it from a lot of different fronts.
Do you, if I could help maybe the conversation with Chaz Rogers coming on board in November, do you look at that under his purview, or is it, whose purview would be to put together a list for you in the department for each and every year?
I fully would expect that the deputy director for facilities would be driving that bus for,
Okay.
for facilities planning, condition assessments, and prioritization. Absolutely.
Yeah, because one thing I think as a committee member I wouldn't want to see is if there was something specific earmarked for a building that maybe this committee thinks should not even be touched.
Absolutely.
By giving a blanket approval,
It's
we
no
get
different
into
than
that.
it's a paving discussion, right? I
What?
present a paving plan and everyone says why that shouldn't be done and they should be paving the one
Yeah.
out in front of my house. So I get it. Trust me, I get it. So I'm with you, Peter. Like, we need to be able to develop that long-term plan that says, here's our list of facilities. These are the priorities that we have. And these are the reasons why. And that's the beginning of the discussion.
Yeah, I think
Correct.
that's
Thank you.
the point where I wanted to go with it is, what are the bases under which you're going to make recommendations as the facilities management upkeep matures? What system are you going to put in place? And obviously you're going to be doing that, and the facilities director would be the one who's responsible for it. But I think that's the discussion we really want to have when it comes to these. And then a list of items that have been done, you know, when we get our capital status project report from the previous year, what got done in each of these line items, and then during the current year request, a list of what's anticipated. And at that point, we can just kind of, you know, if it's a list, we can just kind of go, look, you've got public bathroom upgrades and you list 4 different facilities. It's pretty obvious that what the scope of work is. And if it's not in the presentation, you'll be able to give us that information. In backup details, we're not looking for the type of johns you're using or anything like that. We're just looking for an idea of what's the direction and magnitude of the funding, and for the current year request, and what was the effect in direction and magnitude of the previous year request. And we understand you're not there yet, but you got somebody on board who's going to be able to help you document that. When I say you're not there yet, I mean you're not there yet in terms of putting together a document for us to review in this document today. Not that you're not ready to do it and you're on it. Operation.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, so I just.
You know, I again, facilities versus, let's say, highways, as an example. I don't want to be in a situation where we are presenting something collectively with the support of, you know, Capcom, FinCom at town meeting to have town meeting vote it down, right? It should be vetted in such a way that it's a layup. That's what I hope the program would become. You know, we don't want to get into a situation where people are voting things down because they're not informed, or they've never heard of this before, or they don't have a good source of information to go to prior to making the vote. By filling out this life cycle, you know, management program over the coming years. It's going to take to build this. It's going to be based on what we're doing, the cost per unit square foot or whatever it is to do this work, and developing a prioritization. I mean, you're not going to get it done in 1 year or 10 years. It's going to be something you're going to have to
and nor would you want to. There may be things that you just want to catalog in the inventory that requires maintenance at a certain date, and based on useful life forecast or based on known conditions that then we as capital can plan for, because we know you've done an inventory. And just very simple, for instance, the useful life of a roof. You might do an inventory, and we know that we have to, in 2025, we're in place 10 roofs above and beyond what you're normally scheduling as your annual allotment. Or it may be something along the lines of, there's a variety of examples you could use, but your being able to do an asset inventory, like a capital needs assessment for each asset, will inform out year forecasting as much, if not more, than anything we do in terms of facilities. So that'll be really helpful for us. And appreciate the fact that you're obviously thinking about it and working on it.
So I'd just like to run down through really the last year's 2020 forecast to just, I think, briefly give you my 2 cents of sort of where I feel we are right now. I mean, obviously,
On the same topic,
yep.
are
So,
just one
as a-
sec,
go ahead.
just because I want to make sure we get to everything and do the other stuff we need to do.
Sure.
And we've got some people who are going to be leaving early. And I don't want to be shutting off information, but if we're going to have you back, maybe to present some other backup details, it might be just more time efficient to have you do that update on the FY19 stuff then. So if you'll indulge me, we'll jump back to the FY20 request for Jetties Beach, the Public Works Garage, and then we can probably pretty quickly go down through the Public Works fleet maintenance in order to stay on our schedule. So I guess just the thing I'd like to understand, Rob, starting with the Jetties Beach, is where does this fit in relative to the design utility kind of facade? I believe it was facade improvements that were forecast, or that were requested and approved last year. And if you could jump in on Jetties, and then we'll do the Public Works Garage.
Yeah, so there's a big, the master plan for the, let's call it the parks. It's a townwide analysis that's just started. It's going to include a full analysis of all the concession locations and all of our park space. Jetties was included because of its recreational nature, but also because it has the concession there. It's anticipated that there's going to be a tremendous reboot of that entire site. So there's going to be some costly site improvements there as well, not just to the facility itself, to try to alleviate the flooding conditions. There's some playground things there. That would allow us to move forward with final design for all the improvements there and actually start some real construction there. The forecast for the parks planning effort this year is to do the townwide plan, and the first facility is Tom Nevers. That's already funded this year with a reallocation of funding from a previous town meeting that put money aside for playground improvements for Tom Nevers. If you remember, we hit the pause button there before we built a brand new playground. Let's get a plan for what the entire site should look like first. So that's what I'll tell you for that.
Okay. Thoughts, questions, and I want to precede Matt's just because I know he's going to ask is
Erosion.
Oh no, I was going to ask about with respect to Jetties, is there actual facade changes or structural changes to the structure as it sits that you are anticipating? I'm not talking about things you're not going to see after the fact.
No, it's too early to say, but to me, it's a matter of really taking a look at that facility. I mean, is it time to replace it? We're not there yet.
And the
but
reason
we'll be
I
looking at that.
The reason I asked, and then Richard, is because that I think is one of those facilities, and it's not necessarily our role as capital to be reviewing what the historic facade looks like, but it is a legacy category in a way. It's like this is a tradition of how it's always been, and that plays into the recommendation process in a variety of ways, not least of which is public perception and acceptance. So if there is something along the lines of a change to how the structure is going to look and present to the public, I would just suggest that I just want to take the opportunity to mention that aspect of it and ask that we consider that through some type of a work group so that there is not, you don't want to get it to the point where the design is finished and all of a sudden you're finding out people are
I'll go right
wait a
back.
minute, not going to happen.
I'll go right back to my discussion about major capital coming in front of town meeting. I don't, other than existing structure, roof replacements and reshingling or window changeouts, or whatever the maintenance would be. If we're talking about major investment in capital, we're talking about changing something or tearing it down to rebuild it, this is going to take public information sessions, no different than some of the highway projects we're conceptualizing or reconstruction efforts that we're contemplating. We reach out to not just direct the butters, but also open it up to the public for comments. And these are something, you know, as they get identified. I wasn't here when Children's Beach bathrooms got shot down, or got approved but came back at so costly, I believe, was the history there, that they just weren't able to move forward. And now we're dealing with mobile bathroom trailers down there. So, you know, I think there's a way to be able to move forward with progress and actually building brand new facilities that the public will get behind if we approach it properly. And I'm not talking about market change from a hot dog stand to, you know, the Taj Mahal of restaurants. What I'm saying is getting the confidence of the people and the public that are voting for these projects to the table so that we can agree on what the improvements ought to be. Have those designed, and then when they go to town meeting, it should be something that continues to have discussion, but is expected to move forward based on what everyone is actually helping prioritize.
I think it's helpful for you to articulate that, I think, to us, and I think it's just good for us to put in general knowledge, as just the general discussion. That's
Sure.
That's an important point for us to keep in mind. Richard?
I just
and then-
need my memory refreshed on what the $1 million buys us for jetties. What are we getting for?
For jetties, well, I would say right now that the improvements are not defined.
Yeah.
We've discussed everything from, you know, bringing material in to raise the parking lot to the first floor of the building, to a brand new playground, to modifying the upper parking lot, to looking at the natural resources building.
Okay, so the $1 million is just a placeholder?
It's a placeholder.
Contingent upon the results of the public process of your review process, design process. And public.
The first step is this Parks Master Plan.
Yeah.
Right, and the Parks Master Plan has additional funding in this current budget that is going to do final design for Tom Nevers, for instance. As part of that, we're going to have preliminary information, public discussions about what the future for jetties will be. And
That's
so next year, we should be able to do a final design effort for jetties, and if it can be done in a timely manner, have some funding to get started on what some of those outcomes bring to bear.
okay. So, Peter?
So this is more infrastructure, not the edifice called Jetties Beach. It's not the concession stand. You're dealing, what you just were saying was more parking lot, playgrounds.
Playground, new.
Yeah, it could
Right.
be.
So,
It could be anything
Okay.
that's related to the facility, but that's a massive facility.
Yeah. Are you gonna have, I guess along the lines of backup and breakdown, like, you know, I'm gonna stand in front of the select board, and they're gonna ask me questions, and maybe they aren't, but if they do, I wanna be able to say something that I understand.
Sure.
So in terms of dollar numbers.
This is a placeholder for, in support of.
No, but I have a
that's-
specific question.
Yeah.
Is there, do you think there will be available at a point at some time in the relatively near future, so before the end of the year, where you would have an idea of how much of this is for design-related costs for this jetties beach work, and then how much would be the residual that would actually be able to be used for work? I mean, I'm kind of looking for some
I can
numbers.
I can use Tom Nevers as an example. Right now, the planning level effort for Tom Nevers is $50,000.
Mhm.
50 or 100? Yeah, so there's 100 for planning. That's going to be preliminary and final design.
So would you multiply this out by a certain, I mean, I'm not looking for a number right now, I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
looking at it as a backup.
Percentage-wise, you're talking, you know, under, yeah, I'd say 100,000 would more than enough, in my opinion, for design, redesign of Jetties Beach facility. and facility being the entire property.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
From a site design, we're not talking about architectural design for any structure, simple site design.
And
So,
can we, just to be consistent, and again, just a message that gets translated through the process, can we maybe adjust the title to read more that it is site-related design? Or would you like to still be able to have room with any residual funds if structural changes are required?
sure. So, again, I'm just going on what I've seen for historical capital and project development here. And what I've seen has been sort of, okay, we recognize there's something here, it's been funded to some level, and then there's been supplements as the project gets fully vetted and more specific, detailed cost information comes along.
So you prefer broader, and we can narrow it down at a later date?
That's what I was thinking.
Okay, that's fine. I want to, well, it's on my mind, and we're looking at titles and trying to pin I'm just trying to pin stuff down so
Sure.
we have the information we need to make decisions for determination for recommendation, but also so that when it comes to presentation, I'm trying to think forward. So that's why I asked, but your answer is more than sufficient. I appreciate why you're doing how you're doing.
I mean, there's different alternatives, and I think this is the preferred, simply because the other alternative would be go to the, let's say, call it the nth degree of design, get the whole thing designed, and know exactly to the penny what it's going to cost, because you've actually put it out to bid to get numbers, and then everyone says that's not our project, right? So it's more of, hey, recognize that these are important facilities. Back to Peter's initial comments, these are important facilities, and then back to Nat and others' concerns from the past. Do we want a hot dog stand or a Chanticleer facility or something in between? And that's up for the public to decide. I mean, I'm not here telling you what you need. You're telling me what you need, and we're making it happen.
Okay, Peter?
So my question was more towards Jason and the select board regarding our strategic plan. Is it the thought of the select board that going forward, we, the town of Nantucket, will own all of the concession buildings, not the concessions, of course, but just the buildings that they reside in?
Don't we already own them?
Yeah.
Well, we do, but my question is, are we going to continue to own them?
Oh, but that's not, we didn't have any discussion on that on our
Okay.
specific strategic plan, but I don't know if
We
Libby's
haven't
had,
had any discussion
No.
to change curb steps.
yeah, there's been no.
Okay.
So that's
So which means we're going to continue to own buildings.
And I would just encourage that would be a discussion. I mean, it's not our place to state it, but it's our place to make recommendations. But I'll just say it while it's topical, is that would be a discussion to have when, Jason, you had mentioned the select board through its strategic initiatives was looking at a facilities being all the capital assets that are fixed, plan, and mapping these out and determining what the best use of these properties are, not just in the next 2 years or the 3 years, but over to the horizon. So the point is in mentioning that is just that I think Peter makes a good point. What's the most, the maximum benefit for the town for these type of facilities, concessions? But I would support that it would happen in a broader discussion of all the town resources when it comes to land and structures, because we want to make holistic decisions that are strategic. And if we're making strategic decisions that are just kind of in an area, we may miss something that we wish we didn't at a later date. I'm not suggesting anything that you weren't thinking that, but I want to be clear that I think we should include that in a bigger picture discussion.
This is,
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify,
Yeah, please.
what we're doing with all the town properties is looking at it through the lens of housing.
Okay.
So we're not really digging into town property of like 2FG and what's going to go there.
Sure.
We're just looking at through housing. Doesn't mean we can't add that on, and we
Please
should. But just so
Yeah, no, I appreciate you clarifying
strategic
that,
plan is
because
looking at housing.
I misunderstood. So I would, that would be a suggestion if we were to make a suggestion to the select board that I think would be an important one, is getting the facilities, the fixed assets, the ground assets, and the structures, any improvements, cataloged, and come up with a plan for what their usefulness is. And that is very likely part of your facilities, but it's more a policy type of, I know yours is the operations, is the maintenance and the upkeep. And policy is, what does the future hold? And how do we want to direct it and capitalize on it as a community for our long-term benefit? So enough of that. Any other on the?
No, you're right. This is important. This is the same discussion we had with Phil. You know, with the 37, what are we doing with finance? It's all in the same vein of facility discussions, but as far as the concession things, the 3 places that we own all have a different role, but they have one thing in common. They're wooden structures that aren't junk because they weren't ruined with insulation in the floor. They're just sitting there, dry, not to code now, but when you look at children and you look at jetties, forget Surfside because that's different. It's way higher. It might as well be Alta Rock out there compared to the other 2. You get into code stuff and 8 feet off the ground and all of that insanity to sell a hot dog. That's my fear of this whole thing. If the galley was done now, it would be 13 feet high. You'd have an elevator outside. No, it was done just before all the FEMA foolishness came in with, you know, whatever. So in my opinion, what Rob said about laying out the property versus the building, it's the first time I've heard that said that way about jetties. I don't think that was said last year. We were talking about drainage a lot. There was a pipe.
Utilities.
Wasn't there a pipe down there or something that was going to get
David's
fixed?
working on that.
Yeah, I got switched over to David. That's good. Is that not part of this million? That's just a different.
Correct.
Okay. Are we gonna? Can I ask a question, Libby? I don't know if you have the answer to this, or is it Rob? Are we done dumping golf shells down there now?
Yes.
Thank you. Finally.
They
That's
haven't-
one
oh,
tradition.
no, they haven't done
I
that
have no
since-
issue with blowing that up.
Hasn't been done there for a while.
Not that long.
Before my time.
Okay,
All right.
good. No, that's important,
No, I
because
know,
if we
but-
fix all this stuff down there, and we get this pile of scarf shells at the time of year where you can get down there and do something else.
Yeah.
And the seagulls are everywhere, and it's kind of crazy. So that's good that we're not doing that anymore.
It's a dual use community aspect to the facility.
Because, hold on one second. I
Okay,
just wanted to say a couple more things about this, because this is
By all means.
another issue. Select board, sorry. This is, as Peter was saying earlier, I think it was Peter that said this, maybe it was you. This isn't our purview for making some of these decisions, whether it's the strategic planning stuff. Next round of select board members they might change the name to something else. These places need to stay like it's like a miniature island home discussion. That's what this will end up being. I'm telling you right now, Jetties and Children's ends up being like a small downsized version of the same thing as the island home. Why are we doing this? Why don't we just do this? I sort of look at it all as like, are we making any money off something we didn't really pay for? That's good. How far do we want to go with fixing it before it triggers all these other building codes that will actually make us build a crappy building that's going to rot out and isn't really the right thing? How far do we go with fixing before we have to blow it up? That's a big decision that has to get made with that $1 million. You know what I'm saying? Shoring up something and making it stronger versus
I think
we have to all of a sudden
yeah.
do something else.
I mean, honestly, yeah, if you met with any of the people that have been keeping the patients alive for the past 5 years,
building's not rotted. It's just
it's not the building, it's the guts. It's well past.
I'm down there all the time. I
Well
see what's
past.
going on. I mean,
I'm just saying, we've had to close Sandbar over the past 2 years because
that's
of
sewer though.
issues going on.
But that's sewer
But it's
stuff.
not just. It's not just.
Back to the brown.
Same thing with
napkin
children's. We've had issues down there with equipment overloading, the power capabilities. It's just, these are well past their expected useful life. Yes, you can say that there's boards in there that are not rotted. Great. That doesn't have much to do with making sure that these critical facilities are doing their jobs when we expect to do it.
Okay, but my point is, okay, you can't build an open air building anymore the way you could back in the day. You know what I mean? A cottage, a place with open studs.
Yeah,
This
and
would
we can-
end up being a year-round
I'm saying we can discuss.
Heating, air conditioning,
Right.
zillions of dollars. That's what I'm trying to
I
find that
I wouldn't
separation.
necessarily, I'm not ready to go there yet, but you could be right. Maybe
Well,
not, but we need
guys,
to have that discussion.
That's all I mean when I talk about
No, I
the
get it.
legacy versus the,
I
how
get
far
it.
we going.
I
You
get
know
it.
what I
I
mean?
think we
That's
get,
all.
we get it. I think it's important discussion, but, and again, I want to reiterate, I think it's also important that Rob has articulated the process under which he's going to take, which is he's going to have a facilities director, they're going to do an assessment, they're going to figure out through a design process what's required to bring things up to snuff or to make changes in order for it to be functional. And it's going to go through a public input, public hearing process. And I think your points are well taken, and I think Rob's getting them, but we got to move, I want to keep things moving along because we've still got other
Yeah,
things
I
to
understand.
discuss.
No,
So-
just one more little quickie.
Yeah.
When Rob mentioned the meetings that we had with the sidewalks as using that, sort of format for this stuff, I think that's a great idea. Because it doesn't have to go as far as forming a committee like the fire station. It doesn't have to go that far.
It's like an informal work
However,
group.
there's one thing that's different. The money for the sidewalks is already in the bank. It was just figuring out how we're gonna do it. This is not in the bank yet. Like, this isn't like we got money for this building, we just gotta figure out what we're gonna do. This is gonna be an article of something specific. So it's a little different than the sidewalks.
Yeah, public perception is
You
going
know
to
what I
come into
mean?
the decision.
That's all.
Or it's not going to get voted in. And I think Rob, your point is taken on that. I think Rob acknowledges, I think we all agree that, if it's going to be brought forth, it should be brought forth in a manner that's going to get approved, or reasonably so. So I think that's, an important take.
And we have CPC money available potentially for some of these things. Is that correct, Peter? Are you on CPC? Who's on CPC yet?
Just add one
Just
more
asking.
design element to this whole process is a lot of these facilities are only used seasonally, as you pointed out. But back to aligning what we're doing with not just the town's wants and needs, but also with the select board's strategic goals.
Yeah.
And someone mentioned housing over here. It's, I would guess, that we would be adding housing elements to each and every facility that we are looking to rebuild. And who knows what that's going to come at, but it's certainly going to be something we're going to have to look at.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
I'm going to be very bold. That's the smartest thing I've heard all day.
Housing at jetties?
Oh, no, if you're going to rebuild a building, you put housing in the second floor.
Yeah.
Cost-wise, it's not
I
going
agree
to
with you,
hurt.
but I don't know about those
I'm ready
places.
to move in. What a great place
Nope.
to stay.
Anything we do,
Surf the storm
anything.
event. Christie, and then Richard, and then we're gonna move on, because
Yep.
we've got to get to the Public Works Garage. A recap of anything that's outstanding, so Rob understands before he goes out the door, what it is we're looking for from him, and then we've got to move on to other discussion points. So.
Just to
Christie?
comment on a question, I mean, this facilities request is also to serve the people going to the beach, the people going to play tennis. It's not just the facility that this is, a factor of. Also, I was going to ask is this anything doing with the tennis courts? Is there any,
We should be leasing that.
does this affect any of that?
The entire property would be in the equation.
All right, got it.
Thank you.
I know they have, yeah. That's why I was curious to know it.
Richard?
Just really quickly, you have SIP forms for the other two concessions that are not reflected on this recap sheet. Just to,
No, and that's our fault, but we gotta, due to timing, we couldn't get.
okay, I'm just pointing that out. We just need a,
Rebecca's going through that
Okay.
right now to make sure that everything
Okay,
matches up.
so, well, for the purposes of the committee, though, I want to do two things with that knowledge. One, I did not have a chance to read through these things last night, so I did a summary review, and I wasn't aware of that. So number one is, the two other facilities, just as you've got them on your SIP request forms, or what do you call them?
it's $1 million and it's in out years.
Oh, it's out year stuff?
Yeah, out
Okay.
year stuff.
So, and then the next question, so fine, leave it at that. You're gonna incorporate them in the planet and the summary spreadsheet. The next question is, are there any others in DPW facilities or public works that didn't make it to the planet sheet?
To To be honest with you, Mr. Chairman, I haven't, by the time.
You're in the same place.
We're in the same place, to be honest with you, and Rebecca's going through that as we speak to try to firm up, because I think some of the numbers might have had some minor immaterial.
Okay,
changes
so
from what we had.
I get it, it's technical, but what I'd like to make sure we do is we get the update and anything that is added, just highlight in a cover sheet
Yes.
some way.
We'll document with
Yeah.
a quick brief explanation of what the changes are into the sheet.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Just so there's no questions later on, and if there's questions later on, we get them answered before we have to make recommendations if it's relevant. Okay, great. Rob, are you ready to hit the Public Works Garage facility?
Yes.
Thank you.
I was briefly talking with Richard about this before the meeting started, and I think this will get fleshed out in the this year's effort to bring to bear the final design for whatever the facility improvements will include. I've always steered clear of calling it a garage project because I don't believe it's a single building project. This is really a chance to improve the entirety of the DPW facility itself. That said, last year we were really talking about, we were focused on a garage and what was needed in that space. The subcommittee met several times before the summer hit, and we had lots of meaningful discussion. We had some input from the engineer that had done the conceptual designs, and we were able to generate some various cost options that varied from 15 to 18 to 21 million. Since then, and I would say we also talked about imminently signing up a OPM to get this process, the final design for whatever the facility improvements will be, started now. I think the subcommittee will be able to get back together now that summer is over and people are sort of restoring back to having some time available to do this sort of thing. But what is that building going to look like? It's been space, and particularly public meeting space, has been a discussion as of late, mostly because of the construction that's going on right here at 4FG, which is combining now the police and fire. With the training room upstairs and this room here coming under what's expected to be significantly more usage by particularly the fire department for training purposes. It's expected that it's already putting let's say a burden on other public spaces.
Yeah.
And so it's abundantly clear to me that DPW does not have adequate public meeting space, frankly, even private meeting space. But we're expected to incorporate something like that into whatever the facility repairs may be, whether that's part of the newly constructed building or something that we could incorporate into the existing administration building with an addition. That's something that we will be discussing and trying to bring to bear to bring in additional public meeting space to another location in town.
Interesting. Let me ask you just, well, it's again topical. Who is on the work group?
Let's see, it's been a while. I know Peter's on it, Charlie Gibson. Peter, help me if you remember anyone else that was there. Certainly the designers from the original concepts, which was Weston and Sampson.
Weston and Sampson.
Yeah. It's been a while. It's been like early spring than the last time we met.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think it's good for us to have an idea of who's involved, so we have an understanding of what the backgrounds are,
Sure.
and so on and so forth. So, and how much do you, I'll take questions, I just want to answer these two. How much do you believe the public meeting space fits? What's your guesstimate on the cost for that type of facility versus the 18 ask that's listed here? Part of it, more? Was that part of the up to 21, or what are your thoughts?
My thoughts today would be, I would really like to rein it and not go further than 21, but I think it's too soon to be able to tell.
What percentage do you think might be attributed to public meeting facilities not originally planned?
It's going to depend on if it's included in the brand spanking new
Yeah.
space, or if it's
Or it's
retrofitted
separate.
into something else.
Yeah, I just figured if you
Because
had
that's going to trigger things such as additional building upgrades if you go through thresholds there.
Okay, thank you. Further comments from you, Robin, if not questions from the committee? Peter?
Just with your comments at the beginning relevant to finding contractors could even build a building like this, even if it's approved. Is it a mistake, or is it okay to keep it in 2020?
Good question. Wait for a recession.
Oh,
No.
no, I
just-
think it's going to be
Hope out
important.
there at the
I think it's going to be important to push it at least to 21,
Yeah.
to make sure that we are moving forward with a program that everyone feels comfortable with.
I agree.
I think, considering that we're almost through quarter one, that we're behind the 8 ball.
We'll do it right.
So you're at this point saying we'll move to FY21?
Yes.
Okay, just clarity purposes here.
Next item.
Excellent. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, you guys, if we dive into the fleet, we're down as public works, so really the
We're
fleet.
skipping over all the other favorite concessions from my history.
Well, no, we covered.
We already did it.
We
Okay.
covered those, and then the two that Richard, I think you mentioned, are actually out years.
Okay, yeah, they are further out. I got that. Okay.
So we'll
Yeah.
pick those up in an out year discussion, which we still need to get to. Rob, if you could kind of quickly go through, actually, maybe as opposed to that, time being of the essence here, what do we have, does anyone have particular questions on FY20 vehicle requests?
No.
I just have a comment.
Yeah, please.
Some of these are 5-year lifespan vehicles, so I would expect to see in the out years the same type of request. We could put that information in the plan. That makes sense.
Some of them are in there, right? In the summary page? 2025 requests? In this one.
Sweeper.
Some of them.
Some of them, yeah.
One ton
Utility
dump
van.
truck, 2025.
Yeah, some are out there.
Some are
I
out
would
there,
say
yeah.
there's probably a combination of things happening here, Richard. One, it could be an add-on to the tail end of, to round out the fleet, and that, but the point's well taken. Certainly want to make sure that we're carrying this out as far as we can.
So we'll add useful life expirations into the.
You have it in the SIP form. It's just
Yeah,
carrying through to the plan.
just in the summary sheet for us all.
We kind of went through that last year with this 5-year thing. We talked about skid steer, I remember.
Yeah,
And some of that is really kind of like not true. I mean, you know that. We're all in the business some way to know these things. I think there's just some of the stuff is sort of language that comes from the manufacturer or from municipal bids or something. I don't know. Where is it? I mean,
No,
skid steer is not gonna last more than 5 years.
I think-
even here,
I think it's
just
there's a lot of variables with
Yeah.
this, and I think our fleet manager is definitely committed to developing let's say a capital asset management plan
yeah.
that's going to support future asks, which is going to include actual useful lives. There's certain things. We're getting vehicles from other departments and some of our own that may look like they're still ready to roll, but
Yeah.
when you start looking underneath, we have massive body rot, and some of the same justifications for having vehicles stored inside to begin with. So useful life, I think that is a combination of standard practice and placeholders that we're trying to, move forward with. But these will be honed down the
Yeah,
line.
and now to your point, I think, one of the things we want to do along the lines of best practices is be relying on the manufacturer's information for certain things. That would go in the capital assessment, the capital asset needs assessment, whatever you're calling it, your useful life cycle report, whatever you want to call it, so that we can be budgeting out. And then what will happen is it will show up on someone's screen, it will trigger a review the 4th year, and the 4th year they can assess the vehicle and determine, okay, maybe we do need a new one, maybe we don't, maybe it's at the verge where it's going to need overhaul or maintenance, and then what's the cost associated with disposition of it that would offset a new acquisition. So having it in here, I think, is an important tool for our budgeting purposes, and I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that, but I want to state that that's one of the useful aspects. On the specifics, the CCTV Phase 2, that's an actual, I may be wrong, but that's actually a carryover from a previous year request. Phase 1 happened years ago, and Phase 2 was not funded.
Phase 1 happened last year.
Phase 1 was underway last year.
Underway last year.
Yep.
Okay, because we have it down as an 18 request in the coding, not a 20. So
We put it in, I think, as an 18 because we were already taking, we jumped on the coattails of sewer.
Yeah.
Sewer was just about to launch, so we said, hey, we're going to tack on a DPW portion for the stormwater system analysis. And so the contract went out, so we already had started in 18.
okay.
The out years was
Multi-year request.
multi-year.
And did we was it at the time called Phase 2, or, I'm just trying to get a handle on this.
No, it was
General.
phased, I believe, in 18 as well, over,
So Phase 1 was 18?
3 or 4 years.
So, I mean,
That be
I
in
just
here?
think in terms of processing, I would prefer, I think for consistent with how we're doing things, is that this would be a DPW 20 request. It would indicate in the listing it's a Phase 2, so we know it was a previously funded request. But also the year just tells us it's a new request. That's not a big thing, but Peter?
I'm sorry, I forgot.
No, thank you, Libby.
I mean, just for consistency purposes, so we have other requests from fiscal year 18, under Public Works pickup truck, 1-ton dump truck, that are just single year requests that were funded in that year. I mean,
Well,
would
that's what I'm looking-
would we
that's
see
where I was going with it.
CCTV Phase 1 as the fiscal year 18 and then
Well, that's,
this is a
Well, I think when we-
2020?
that was the next
When we
question.
did it, we tried to, quite frankly, if it was multi-year request, that 17 would indicate the first year that whatever, or 18 would indicate the first year, like the vehicles. If you have the same replacement of the same F-550 over a 10-year, every 4 years, just for discussion. And it started in 17, then 17 would be the first year, and we kept the same number with all the out years of when we were replacing that particular item. So if you want me to change to break this out into multiple years, it's going to, I have no problem doing it. It's going to make the report infinitely longer.
Is it different because it's a phased project though, as opposed to just a
Well, not
scheduled
really, because
replacement?
It's the same project started with multiple year funding.
Gotcha.
I mean, because using that analogy there, that discussion that we're having, then the second phase of the DPW building should be its own number in 21. When it's just a continuation of a currently started project.
right, but
It's not listed as another phase though, so it's hard to, it seems like the same
yeah, I think
project.
one way or
It
the
is
other,
same
we need.
project, though. There's no change to it. I mean, CCTV work is phased over multiple years, so it's not a new project in 20. It's the same project started 2 years ago.
I see this as like consent type thinking, some of this stuff.
Yeah, but this
I
is
know
a
you
different.
can't say that here,
No,
but
no,
I
no,
mean,
that, I get
just-
you, but, what, I think
No.
Peter and I are talking about a different track, which is using coding to track information that
Yeah.
says multiple things.
Are we on the
So you-
5th F through 550
Yeah, like,
or
we
the
need to
3rd?
understand
I
where
got
we
it.
are.
I mean,
Yeah,
it-
I hear you.
If that is the
And
case,
it's
I would just
fine.
That's what
include
he's
the
saying.
amount in 2018 that
Yeah.
was spent in 2018. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we should, I like your idea of just CCTV work and then show it in.
show that what we've spent,
Whatever
Yeah.
years.
what we're
Yeah.
requesting,
We
and
can put 18 in to show you what, we could show 18, that's fine, it's not a problem, the reports can be
it would just be more.
started backwards
well,
to show what the original.
I think we need to have two things. I think we need to have it in the prior year to indicate that it was previously funded, so it's phased. But we should also have it in the title, so utility van phased, or, it should say recurring and the interval. It doesn't,
Yeah.
we don't have to have long reports or anything, it's just, another 16 or 20 letters in the text, so that it indicates
Some italic.
something
thing.
that's recurring, it's a recurring every 3 years or 5 years. I mean,
Saves us asking the question.
yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do is get all the information in one place that makes it useful for everyone
Sure.
to be able to process and not have to be redundant. And
Yep.
sitting here talking about this for 10 minutes, we could all be,
Well, the
never gonna get that
CCTV,
time back.
as a specific example, makes sense because if someone's asking when's the last time we did it, we go back to a line item as opposed to,
Right.
oh, that project, and that was only phase 2. Well, when was phase 1? And you're chasing it back even further.
Yeah,
Having it as something, it's gonna be ongoing. Some years are gonna, right now is really early in the stages to get the condition assessments done. And then down the road, it'll be more keeping up and making sure those areas are still in great shape.
okay.
Yeah, got it. Good.
So I'll mark that as outstanding for Brian. Okay, great. Anything else on vehicle, or I should say, public works related expenses requests? No, good. Out years, do you all, Rob, you got any highlights on the out years? Obviously,
Yeah, the bridges
things-
are both gonna get kicked. I'd say all three at this point. So we are we're going into proposals now for bridge structural analysis. We'll have assessments done over the course of the next year, but we won't be ready for any expected funding until well after town meeting.
Does that include Millie's?
Yes.
Okay.
But didn't we fix the Massasoit Bridge, or is that just temporarily fixed?
Massasoit's been repaired. We're talking about investigating these for replacements.
Okay.
Okay. Any others?
Oh.
Okay. Rob, so just, I think a recap, is we'll be in reverse order. We'll I'll work through with Brian on the, recurring and phased coding and the years. We'll be looking for, I mean, to the extent you can give us backup on
Anything and everything.
anything and everything that's helpful. I mean, a tear sheet on vehicles is always good to look at. It might,
Yep.
create a question that gets answered that solves a problem before it happens. So that's what we're looking for on those types of things. With respect to the facilities, we'd be looking for kind of a list, not a comprehensive list with dollar numbers at this point. I think it's unfair to ask, but for the FY19 recap, just a list for discussion of generally what you targeted. So maybe we can ask some questions as to why, or if it's in there, we don't even have to ask you why. But that would be part of backup when you come back. And then along the same lines, the FY20, if you could just kind of put in 3 or 4 sentences of what your targets are, and not necessarily 3 or 4 sentences for each line item, but the general, the philosophy going into having a facilities director doing the inventory and assessments and what you're hoping to accomplish with the FY20 funds. Public Works Garage, we know we're bumping out, and then the park study, some idea of what, just something to document the concept of what the design versus the residual funds would be for improvements. And I think that's it, unless is there anything? Oh, filling in out years, if you could, for vehicles.
Yep.
And I know that it's not, you know, it's gonna be subject to change, but if you give us an idea, I think it's better to have it in the plan and remove it based on reasonable assumptions in the plan, and then not have it at all. Knowing that it'll be refined as we kind of mature our processes with more staff resources. Is that fair? Anyone else? Comments, concerns?
Just the
Richard?
question, is the capping number, is that correct, 8.2? Or is that,
We've heard as high as 14.
Right.
I'm seeking a justification
So-
on the
so
numbers.
what
We
number-
actually have a consultant right now who's looking at closure costs. We hope to have that certainly this fall.
I thought, I don't even want to bring that up.
Yeah.
Good.
It'll start blowing up.
And solid, just along the lines, I mean, clearly solid works is separate, solid waste is separate. We mentioned some things we needed backup on those
Yep.
from the previous meeting. If you need clarification, we can get it to you.
Yep.
I think that was it.
I
All right.
really appreciate the committee's input, and I look forward to next Thursday transportation.
Yeah,
Thank you, Rob, for everything.
thank
Yeah.
you, Rob.
Thank you.
Big plate.
You're embedded now, okay, into this place,
get back out there?
pretty much.
Thanks, Rob. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So where that leaves us is the Rory, and Brian has left, so that's kind of unfortunate because one of the things we anticipated in establishing our schedule was that we wouldn't be
Doing as much
also
homework.
for staff.
Yeah.
That the Rory would be validated, functioning, and running, so we could be doing it online inputs, having discussions, and not doing it all in paper for 27 requests. We don't have that, and we don't have a form at this point to process any Rory information. It wasn't in our packet. So, I'll just note that. I think, Jason, Peter, you kind of missed, we had a discussion, I think it's relevant, you should be aware of it. It's actually very relevant. We had a discussion about getting requests without time to preview them, so that we could, part of our schedule was anticipated that certain things would happen. We would get requests in advance with backup details. We'd be able to formulate our questions so that the department head wasn't doing a request by request presentation, which takes longer. Instead, they'd be responding to our questions. We would then have time for discussion of those topics. We would have time to discuss out years. We would have time to discuss the Rory and the inputs while we were together with town admin and finance. It's not happening that way for a variety of reasons, which aren't really a finger pointing exercise. It's a matter of identifying that there are shortcomings and how is it going to affect what we do? How do we want to address it? So what we determined was, a part of the discussion, there was previous discussion, if a request comes in without backup, it doesn't get a recommendation. I don't, and I think the consensus was that that's not, although, you know, might feel good in a sense because we're not getting what we need, it really doesn't, it kind of, we shoot ourselves in the foot. So as opposed to that, what we're going to be doing is reviewing departments. If something comes in and they need backup, we're going to have to reschedule them. And that's going to elongate our schedule, which is important for the select board to be aware of. Because I think we were down for the 12th. We had our May schedule anticipated completion on the 12th or the 19th. Our August schedule anticipated completion on the 12th. Our September schedule revision anticipated presentation to the select board on the 19th of December. All of those things anticipated that we would have reviewed 4 departments incomplete and completed our rankings of relative importance by now. We've now reviewed 3, and we only have 1, I believe, that we did the rankings of relative importance on. So I'm not suggesting that we're kicking this out for a 2-month period, but I want to you know, we needed to have the discussion, one, of how to handle what came in incomplete, and two, what effect it had on our schedule. So, that's kind of where we are with it now, is basically we're gonna roll with it for FY20, understanding that there are some changes being made, hopefully, that will address the shortcomings in the process that are part of the whole growing pains that we're going through as a community with capital assets and improvements and developments.
Misinformation,
And yeah, that too.
a lot of it.
So, I know that's a mouthful, but it was important, and I just tried to summarize as best and as quickly as I can for the interest of time.
If I compare our last meeting last week with Deputy Chief on the Marine, and we really dug into that, and I feel like
Yeah.
we all understand it. We get it, and we can make a decision right now if we had to.
Yeah.
Right?
You did a great job explaining that last night, by the way.
With,
Concrete building thing.
with something like this, where it's just pages and pages of requests, it's realistic that we're going to have 2 or 3 meetings. We're going to have to schedule some more. I still think we can get to the December 19th or 12th, whatever the date is.
Yeah.
But this is, like, I wouldn't, if I had Roy in front of me, I wouldn't write anything down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I
Yeah.
was late because it's executive session, but there's something like this is going to just take more and more time. When you have things with, like last week, we can get through it in one meeting
Yeah.
Yep.
and a couple follow-up questions.
Well,
But not with transportation, not with DPW.
yeah, and transportation, I agree. Yeah, I think your points are well taken. What we had hoped, and I think could serve to condense some of these things down, is if we have backup in advance, because then we're going to be and with appropriate time to review it in advance, so that when we come in, we've had an opportunity to review it, and we can ask department questions and department head questions, and hear other members' questions. And I think between the backup detail, if it's sufficient, and the Q&A, it will round it out, and we might be able to get through, maybe not 27 requests in a meeting, but the idea is that right now we're scheduled every Thursday until December, till December 19th.
Can I bring something up
Yeah,
about
one
that
second.
for just
So-
a second? Okay.
So the question is gonna be, where's there gonna be give in our schedule? Are we going to, and you guys should start thinking about this, are we gonna start meeting Tuesdays and Thursdays, or Wednesdays and Thursdays, or Thursdays and Friday? Because not only do we need to figure it out in advance, we're gonna need to schedule a room. So I just.
I don't know if
throw
we're
it out
there yet. It's good to talk about, but I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
we have to throw in a couple Tuesdays, then we will, to do what we want to do.
Yeah.
I want to follow up on something he said, and then I want to go to this new meeting thing. Okay, so for example, what he brought something up today. I wonder if anyone's caught this. Nobody ever mentioned meeting rooms out space out in dump before. It's the first time I've heard that, but it's really good. Like, I mean, now you're talking cameras, the IT room, in this $18 million thing is what I'm trying to say. Then, you know, we had a meeting down at Steamship the other day. They're going to renovate and fix that room. And I'm sitting there going, well, I could see some committees in here someday maybe. Because, I mean, Hyannis Terminal has it set up for that from 1994.
Well,
No, but the new meeting space issue is new.
No, I know, and
And
but we did.
we didn't talk
it.
about that last year. We did?
No, we talked about it this year.
I don't remember that.
No,
Not about the
I don't know if
DPW.
you were there, but we
Okay.
were talking
I
about
think that's a great
a
discussion.
general concept that any public facility
Has
that's
to be
constructed
built that way now.
comes wired for meeting
Right
space.
over here.
Yeah.
The only good thing
I mean, we
about
didn't
that.
get into detail. We didn't
Yeah.
talk about specific buildings, but you make good points.
The
on
and the other thing I wanted to say is, you know, Steve, we asked, I mean, last year, we kind of talked about meeting basically, I don't want to say year round, but starting way earlier, which we did, but that was for some of the stuff at STM. And we've sort of just rolled right into annual, but a lot earlier than we would have been traditionally. So I think that the number of meetings that we're having in the detail is spread out more automatically because we've started earlier anyway. Am I wrong?
Yes,
Okay.
unfortunately. So
All right, go ahead.
we added one meeting to our schedule this year.
Overall for ATM?
Overall, one meeting.
One?
Actually,
When did we have
When
last
did
year?
we
12
start?
last
wait a
year?
minute, wait a minute.
Before.
Wait a minute. If you include the special town meetings and you subtract them, we actually
That's what I
have,
mean, yeah.
we actually have less meetings this year, and we're trying to do the out years. And we
All right,
anticipated.
I thought we had more
And
overall.
we anticipated the Rory input form we don't have.
We had a lot
So
last year.
I'm just saying, for the sake of discussion,
I
we
missed
started
one last.
earlier with the idea that based in May,
Yeah, we would.
department heads would have information in earlier, but they weren't able to do that for various reasons, so it is what it is. You know, we're gonna have to figure it out.
We
We'll
might
get
have to
there.
go back to a little bit of more pencil and paper, kind of thinking of some stuff.
Well, I think, we can't.
Just to make it,
The capital database has been, capital financial database is implemented. There's,
no, I don't mean that. I'm
Serious
talking about
cost
just kind of grading some things, I don't know,
you know,
a little bit more
well, you mean the
simple.
Rory
And then
form?
maybe having staff.
Well, we're not
put
gonna have a
stuff
choice.
in.
It's gonna have to be a paper and pencil on the Rory forms like we did last year until that's up and running.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta go, be somewhere at 12:30. Just, Nat, you know, the meeting space issue is talked about, the select board, the town admin,
Yeah.
at that level. So, we had one
I just
conversation
haven't
here.
heard it about DPW, but I think that's brilliant.
No, the DPW is first I heard it. Just so you're aware, I'll make the date of next meeting is obviously Thursday next, on the 20th at 10:30.
At Wanacoma.
Wanacoma Water.
Speaking of new meeting space.
Okay.
Just so you know.
I might have to put an alert out to everybody, like the day before.
Yeah.
What are we discussing?
Transportation.
Transportation.
Yeah.
All right, so no committee reports. We'll get with sewer before David's.
I have my first
Oh, did you have the
senior next
We'll give,
Thursday at 4.
so say 4.
Yeah, downtown,
And,
which is great.
any other thoughts or
Even though I don't
comments
have any
before we
time
adjourn?
at all.
No? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Is this today's?
Steve. What's your name?
So are all these
Al.
19?
Allie who?
Are these last year requests that got bumped out?
Are you from here?
Well,
These will be 20.
see, that's how,
I'm not really-
yeah, that's exactly my concern. So if what they're trying to do is convey that this request is a carryover. The way I read this,
Carryover, like a duplicate 2 years later.
well, without any type of a notation, I'm reading this screener is an 18 request that wasn't funded, and now it's being, they're requesting.
Right, and so